Kia ora. Hello. Welcome back again. WAO podcast. I have Matt with me. Matt BOWDEN. Nice to see you.
Hey.
I want to kind of remind myself that last week we met here at the cafe and we had a bit of conversation, and I was like, I want to share it. Let's see what we can talk about. And I feel like I don't like to introduce people as such, because I feel like it puts them in some sort of container. I want to discover, and I want the ones that are watching this or hearing this to discover who is the person that we're talking to. Is it one thing? Is it multi-layer? Is it a few things? Is it nothing of them as well? Is it a spirit? So welcome to WAO podcast number 4, and today I'm with Matt BOWDEN, a.k.a. Starboy, a.k.a. what else I can say?
Iggy. My other name is Iggy.
Iggy.
Ignatius.
Ignatius, Iggy. Why Iggy, by the way? Can you tell me?
Well, I was living in Thailand for 5 years, and in the Thai language, you cannot end a syllable with a t sound, a T. So you can't say Matt, because that would be 2 syllables, Matt and t.
So Matt et te.
Yeah, so everyone say, are you Max? Mad Max. I'm like, well, I kind of, no, I'm not actually. Max is somebody different. I'm Matt. And eventually that wasn't working, and I thought it's probably good to get a different name anyway, because my name, Matt BOWDEN, doesn't Google so well anymore. And so I just got to start being Iggy, and that worked easier. And I can write it in Thai, and it sounds good. Iggy. And
yeah. How long have you been living in Thailand?
I just got to stay in English. 5 years. I lived in Chiang Mai for 5 years.
Okay. Can you say it in Thai?
Happy.
Happy. Okay.
Yeah,
5 years. Okay.
years. Yeah.
And you said your name, Matt BOWDEN, doesn't Google that well. Why is that?
Well,
I haven't Googled your name. I just had a
yeah.
conversation with you.
No. Well, I did some activism for a few years, and was quite high profile. And it was around drugs, and that doesn't wash really well if you're trying to open a bank account or something, you know. And I've got sort of an international profile for some of my activism and some of the things that I've done.
Okay. Drugs. You mean pharmaceutical drugs, like pharmaceutical drugs, like Pfizer drugs, or Teva, or any of these guys, or more like different type of drugs?
No, so I guess my story, or when I sort of came to prominence, was having some people close to me lose their lives using recreational drugs. Ecstasy, methamphetamine, these sorts of drugs. And so really looked at that and thought, hey, this situation is really poorly managed. Everything else we have sort of quality control measures. The drugs we don't. So I went to Wellington, and I don't know if this is an international audience, but we're here in New Zealand, and it's a smallish country, so you can show up at Parliament and say, who's writing the drug laws? Can I sit down and have a meeting with you guys? How come the drugs are illegal? Come on, people are dying. Wouldn't it be better if we just had some quality control? I mean, the alcohol's far worse. And I've got some different ideas. Can I submit some different ideas? And that's what I did. And so I became sort of famous for inventing party pills in New Zealand. So I said, let's create some alternatives to the drugs that are being sold. The drug policy teams, when I asked them, why are the drugs illegal? They said, well, because America said that if we didn't sort of play ball with their drug laws, they'd stop buying our meat and cheese. And we need to keep selling meat and cheese to America. That's why the drugs are illegal, Matt.
Okay, good to know. It's not only because we're self-sustainable and self-reliant on New Zealand sort of feel and influence in our communities. Because of others, we make the laws. Makes sense, because everything else is because of someone else, rather than because we actually choose, or because we feel that is the best for our communities. I totally agree, and it makes sense as well. When was that, by the way?
This was in about the year...
Let me check my diary.
About 2000, I guess. 2000 is when it all sort of went down. And you're quite right. We make laws. We are sort of we're really small on the field, And so there's a lot of bigger countries. And we were just being a little bit shy, I think, and being pushed around. But you need to stand up to bullies. Often if you stand up to them and you outsmart them, then they'll pull you alongside and use you as a resource or a friend instead. And particularly if your ideas are good enough that everyone says, hey, yeah, that's a good idea. And so for New Zealand, often we're seen as a nation of ball chasers. If you look at New Zealand, often if you travel overseas, people think either Lord of the Rings or ball chasers. That if someone's got a ball, then New Zealand's going to be able to run and catch it, and we're good at rugby and stuff like that. And I just kind of thought, well, given that some of the other species on the planet, like dogs, for instance, are better at chasing a ball than we are, perhaps we could be known for something else, like pragmatic policy making, or common sense, or something like that. And so this is where I was sort of pushing, thinking, let's stand up and develop a new system and put it in place here in New Zealand. We can create some drugs that aren't on America's list, build a regulatory system around that, and then if we sort of promote that, surely all the other countries will follow. We could end that whole war on drugs thing. And that's what's...
Okay, interesting. That was in 2000, obviously. And what government it was at the time that you sort of discussed those subject with?
Well, whichever government it is, it's a little bit like if you're in a yacht and you want to get from here to there, and the wind, you've got to sort of, whichever way the wind is blowing, you need to sort of angle your sails and pitch so that you can use the wind that is blowing to get in the direction that you want to go. And so with National at the time, which was the time, then you need to be talking about how you're being, you're going to give the government more control, and how you're being tough on people that don't agree and all this kind of thing. And then with Labour, it's different. It's about how can you provide this kind of a social communities. And so I'd work with either. And also you can, at the time you could work with the Greens because they were, I don't really want to run anybody down, but they had a slightly different philosophy to what they've got now. Yeah.
Okay, so a bit more open about that to potentially become something that allows that to unfold. I think there is a country, Portugal, which legalized most of, I should say, drugs.
Yeah.
Back in the early 2000s, and they have seen a major drop in use of Class A drugs like meth and other substances that weren't quite great for the community by legalizing actually and having a bit more control around it rather than fighting the war on drugs, the war on terror, the war of wars.
Yeah.
We're great in wars, aren't we? If there is something that humans are doing really well, is war.
Really? Yeah.
I think we've maximized everything we can. We've proved that we're doing really well in war. So I suggest move on from that war mentality.
Yeah, it's all othering. I mean, war requires othering, the idea of looking at somebody and thinking, well, they're different, and looking at your differences instead of realizing, like you said, you don't want to put people in a container. I don't even really want to put myself in a container. I sit and think all of our identity really is a lie, is a fiction. What am I? I am light. I am divine energy in human form, and
yes, you
and
are.
So are you. We are all one.
Can I touch the light?
You can see the
I
light.
have touched it and seen it. I feel enlightened.
Yeah, I mean, how do you touch light? Can you feel light? You see light. You perceive light.
You feel it. I think you can feel it as well, and you perceive it.
Yeah, we're photosensitive, aren't we? Yeah, you can. Yeah. And just to be light, and then all other identity and all other facets of who we think we are. Like I say, I'm an activist, or I'm a musician, or I'm an artist, but really, I'm just me. I'm just a being of conscious energy in human form.
Yeah. And I'm kind of interested to know how did you come about to offer and think like, hey, wait a minute, it's not that you one day wake up and I'm going to develop these party pills or whatever alternative to the intake of alcohol or substances that alter our minds. Is it something that was built up for you? Is it something that you noticed that you wanted to change, or kind of how did you come to be involved with it?
Well, I come from a real a spiritual kind of a background, and just want to do things that are going to be helpful to people. And one day, actually, somebody came into my office. I was selling advertising at a car magazine. I started that performance car magazine. I was on the team that kind of put that together. And somebody came in and said, hey, you're good with marketing. Do you reckon you could market this product? These are some pills. And I said, well, what does it do? And I'd been brought up pretty straight. I smoked some pot when I was at school and so on. And I'd had some interesting psychedelic experiences as a child on clinical trials, which... But wasn't into partying or drugs, and so I thought that they were going to be kind of like a Red Bull or something. And the guy just said, "Why don't you take a couple of the pills and see what happens, and tell me what you think?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I popped a couple of pills, and then I had I had a lunch meeting with an ad agency, and I sat down at the meeting, and it just really occurred to me that there's such an enmity between the meat that I was eating and the non-meat items, and that I could just feel the energy between meat eating and non-meat eating, and it felt like a war about to break out between them. So I jumped up and warned everybody in the restaurant, and the guys I was meeting with said, "Hey, are you on drugs?" And I thought about it, and hey, yeah, I'm on drugs. How about that? And yeah, I didn't get any advertising sales that day. You know, I didn't keep working there for too much longer. But I kind of thought about it. What the hell's the point of this? You know, and they just ruined my lunch. And they said, well, this could be like a safer alternative to other drugs. I looked at it and realized that these were natural compounds. They had lysergic acid in them, and which is a precursor to LSD, of course, and which comes from morning glory seeds. You know, you see these beautiful convolvulus flowers sort of growing all over the forest, and that beautiful purple kind of flowers that have got 5 little petals, and they're morning glory anyway. These seeds drop out. They've got this ergot alkaloid, and I looked into it and found that various races and cultures going back to the dawn of time were using plants to connect spiritually. And for me, I'd been in a churchy kind of situation with some people that had spiritual gifts and could do cool psychic stuff, and other people didn't and were dull. It would be a word for it, but jealous and resentful. And I thought, well, obviously, this is the solution. You know, people need to use psychedelic plants if they want to sort of connect spiritually. And I could see there's a benefit to that, but also could see that there was benefit in creating safer alternatives to drugs that are dangerous. And then while we were sort of playing with that idea, really, is when we had an ecstasy death in the family. And there'd only been 3 ecstasy deaths in New Zealand, and so it was a big thing. And just
so one of them was in your family, okay?
Yeah, it was a third cousin that sort of passed away and left a child behind. And then I thought I should do something about this. And then another friend or colleague that I knew commit suicide using a samurai sword, actually, on crystal meth, commit harikari. I don't know if you're going to need to edit that out. You'll talk about that, but that was that's horrific. And those two things in my life, I just thought, geez, I've really got to do something about this. We should have some safer drug alternatives. We should have some quality control systems like we do with everything else. And so I read the drug policy, and I read the laws, and the policy sort of called for people to come forward from the community with solutions for how to reduce demand. It says, we've got drugs are a supply and demand issue, and we give money to police and customs to reduce supply. But the ridiculous thing about that is that if you reduce supply without reducing demand, all that happens is that you increase the value, which increases the opportunity for a black market. It empowers organised crime, which empowers terrorism. And so the actual, organised crime is being empowered by the prohibition laws. And just that realisation that if instead you reduce demand by supplying a safer alternative, then you don't have to worry about the supply anymore. And so that was really the thinking, was let's have an alternative to meth, because meth was the big problem there.
And I guess it is a little bit still a problem in New Zealand, but obviously because there isn't. Again, we went back to what was before that. We went back to prohibition. We went back to war on drugs again. And you're right. It's like the government put money into police and customs and all these things, and it's just kind of vicious cycle that doesn't really end. The end result in which mostly governments are promoting as an end result, right? It doesn't reduce the demand. It doesn't reduce the crime. It doesn't reduce the education around it. So I feel like I remember coming to New Zealand in 2003, and I thought, finally, I'm kind of breaking off. I came from New York, Israel, Barcelona. I'm from Israel originally, and in my early 20s, I was exposed first time to ecstasies and other substances, which made an incredible impact in my life in a positive way, for me at least. Never abused it as such, to be honest. Never was into alcohol as well, so that was a good advantage for me over there. And then I remember coming to New Zealand thinking, after a few years, I'm going to just relax, it's very, very easy, kind of, relaxed. So I arrived in Mount Maunganui. I was there for 6 months. Then I arrived in Auckland in 2003. Thinking that I'm just chilling in New Zealand, finally kind of doing different things. And I think I went to a dairy at the time, and I'm not smoking, so I just went to this dairy, and I'm seeing kind of this, it was really well branded. in dairies as well. And it was these party pills. I can't remember the name, but it was like, it's like the weed stuff gives you laughter and you take it and laugh. I was like asking what it is. And he said, hey, look, it's party pills. It has a BZP in it, but also other ingredients that actively, whatever they do. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try it. You know, I stayed. And man, I think for the next 5 years, instead of having relaxing time, I was just having great time. And it was absolutely, I loved it. And obviously a few of us friends and things like that. And I used to work as well in different food industry as well. And so I have used quite a lot of them in all sorts of various variants and branding and models and things like that. And for me, I felt it was so awesome to have something that I know how I can actually manage that. And I know what's the risk in a way and how I can manage and what intake, and I can trust that it's been tested. It's been unlike anything else at the moment, which you're not sure, you know, the effect of that. And then when they took it out, I was so upset. I was like, wait a minute, we're going back to actually allowing people to still buy alcohol, which is possibly, in my opinion, the worst drug that we currently still have. It doesn't really have a good benefit in it, in my opinion, but that's another argument. So I felt like we just kind of went back to the same patterns. And I was wondering why the decision was made. And I felt that it wasn't just like, as it was promoted, for the safety of our kids. I think it was slightly deeper than safety of children. Have you got any other knowledge about it?
I do, actually. I've got quite a lot of knowledge. So just to quickly recap, so the idea was to create a safer alternative to dangerous illegal drugs. And so crystal meth was the dangerous illegal drug. We created a safer alternative. The pills that we created, if you took, 2 or 3 pills, you'd be up all night, sure. Okay. If you took 50 or 100 pills at once, which people did as a suicide attempt on a number of occasions, you didn't require medical intervention. You would stabilize by yourself. And so 96% of cases of people who had an overdose and went to hospital, the treatment provided was a verbal reassurance only, and a couple of people got given Valium pills, as long as you didn't take it on top of other drugs or something. And so they were kind of death-proof. So over 8.5 years, 26 million pills were consumed by 400,000 consumers on 10.5 million occasions, and there were 0 deaths and 0 lasting injuries.
Wow.
And people were not getting addicted because we chose a molecule that doesn't touch that addictive part of the brain. So that's what we did. And at that time, government did research, because they said to me right at the beginning, they said, yeah, that does fit the drug policy. Reducing demand does reduce harm to consumers, and that's what the policy's about. So just start making your pills and, do your thing, and we'll tell the police to just kind of leave you alone because you've talked to us. And then if it works, then we will write new laws and we'll build a quality control system, like you say. And yeah, but if you kill somebody, then that's the end of it. You can't do that. All right, and so we hired chemists and did our research to make sure that we found a molecule that had been used before as an antidepressant. So we had some tox data on it, toxicity. And so later research found that of that 400,000 people who were using the drug, 20% of the adult population had tried it, that 45.6% of them, which is 50 or 60,000 people, had stopped using illegal drugs or were using it so they didn't have to. So there was a glut of meth on the market, meth prices dropped, and there was an oversupply. So that tells you the demand reduction worked. But also, as the pills started to get out there, and I only really wanted them sold to people that took existing drugs, like I wanted to sell them in nightclubs and places where you buy a pee pipe, and that's about it. I didn't patent. I didn't really know how to do that. Didn't realise you could patent. I was a bit naive anyway. And so a lot of other people came along and copied the products. Each new person came along, made them stronger, and went for a wider market until you could buy them at not just the corner store, but the hairdresser and everywhere. That's when we went to government and said, can you put regulations in now, please, to have them only in R18 outlets? And they were really slow to do that. And then I realised they were being pushed from another angle. And once they started selling in liquor stores, the liquor industry noticed that their revenues were down by 20 million or something. And they realised that people were spending their Thursday pay packet on pills because it was a better deal than alcohol. And then the liquor industry started pushing. And so what happens in New Zealand is whenever there's an election, the politician needs to look cool and look powerful by taking a decisive action, and also has to appease the liquor industry, because I didn't realise it, but they pay for the election. And so they rock up and say,
Lobby.
that's it. Yeah.
I know,
If you want
yeah.
your money, you've got to do this. Get rid of that. And so every time there's a big ban, it's normally coincides with an election year. And that's what happened. The liquor guys were losing cash. And there might have been pressure from the people making money out of illegal drugs as well. But yeah, that's what
Okay.
happened.
See, it's nice because yesterday I spoke to Raf Manji from the Opportunity Party, and we actually talked about the problem of lobbying in governments and how basically decisions are often made not for the greater good or for any interest of our communities, basically for the interest of some corporates.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the case again, and potentially the case again of making a call based on what do we get as a politicians to be looking well for the outside world.
Yeah. Well, this is what we found is I kept saying, and I realized I needed to, in order to move the politicians, I needed to educate the public. So I got in there between the government and the industry and the public. And I went to all the competitors that had set up and said, you guys have copied my product, you've broken my copyright, you've just copied all my labels, you've copied my wording, and you've stolen my intellectual property. I'm not going to sue anyone. I'm going to go and deal with the media, and I'm going to pay lawyers to draft new legislation, and you guys are all going to pay for it and cover my expenses. This is my account number. This is how much money you want to all put in there now. Otherwise, your stuff's going to get banned next week and none of you know what to do. And so that's what happened. And so I got the industry to fund me. I stepped back. I really wasn't making a lot of money out of it. My brands weren't real big brands and I didn't want to be making money out of it. I just wanted to be doing the right thing because I was really excited. I knew that if I got it right, I had a very strong sense that I would be allowed to rewrite the drug laws how I wanted them and that I would be able to get to United Nations and be shown as world best practice. That's what I was going for. And so when the government didn't write laws, we wrote the laws and consulted with all of the stakeholders, health, hospital, police, developed a code of practice and then asked them to mandate it and said this is the only code of practice for regulating legal recreational drugs in the world. So this is now world best practice and recognised under common law. So you need to gazette it or do something better. The government realised that they needed to catch up, and that's when they started creating legislation because we'd gone first because we understood common law and common sense. We actually got as far as over that, took me about 15 years to draft legislation that says you're allowed to create new drugs. If you put them through the same safety tests as a medicine, you're allowed to sell them. And we took that to United Nations, and United Nations Office of Drug Control in Vienna said, well done, New Zealand. It's the only solution on the table for the emerging drugs threat. And I thought, wow, I'm gonna get knighted. This is great. But I didn't, as it turned out.
So what's happened?
A number of countries came into workshops with New Zealand on how this would work for them. But one country in particular didn't like it. And I got a call one day from my people in the government and they said, hey, Matt, we've had a diplomatic communication from the USDEA about your law. And I said, what does it say? And they said, well, in summary, we can't tell you what it says, but it basically says WTF. So this is going to the bottom of the pile, but eventually the Prime Minister's going to see it and you're going to be toast. And I didn't know what that meant, really. Also, someone told me the liquor industry had talked to the Prime Minister and I was going to get taken down in the election. I didn't know what that meant.
Taken down? Wow, that's okay.
They said, get your affairs in order.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
going to be taken down. And I was looking really good, at that time. But then synthetic cannabis had come along. People selling the synthetic cannabis products started about 2006, and I'd stayed out of it for a few years, and then everybody in the industry wanted to go that way, and I had a team of pharmacologists and realised, hey, some of the compounds that are coming out are carcinogenic, some of them are likely to cause death. I could do this research and find some that are safe and just further the quality control thing, but I have to be in that industry. And so I don't know if it was a good decision or not, but I moved into that industry and started designing cannabinoids, hundreds and hundreds of them, and patenting them, with the idea that some of them were real mild and safe and some weren't, and making some products. But there were so many people and so many compounds flying out of China, it was near impossible to manage it. And so with synthetic cannabinoids, there were maybe 100 million exposures, and again, there were no deaths. There were some addictions, and we were looking at, okay, how can we keep our products away from that area? And it was just getting really messy. And then that's right. And that's when we heard, okay, the liquor guys are going to take you down, and there's pressure from the States. And the next minute, there was suddenly people protesting in every town in New Zealand, really well funded, with placards saying that I was trying to kill their dog, basically, saying the legal high industry wants to test on animals. And as scientists, the government's top scientists had identified that this was the weak link in the policy, was that it required animal testing. And if they could convince the public that we wanted to test on dogs, then they'd be able to get people to rise up. And so the ministry were coming out saying there's no suggestion of testing anything on dogs. This is ridiculous. But it was too late. All the dog lobby was up, and every night for a week, the TV news at the time, Campbell Life, did a big special on these protests against dogs being killed by drugs. And then the Prime Minister at the time, John Key, came out and says, "Oh, this is the guy that was right into 1080, that poison that was for killing all the possums and stuff in the forest." He came out and said it's just unconscionable to think that they want to hurt these small fluffy animals. This is the most ridiculous thing a Prime Minister's ever said. And so at the same time, they sent the tax guys in every department to audit me and go right to the start of my life, every transaction I'd ever done, to try to find something I'd done wrong. And they came back and said, "Looks like you might have forgotten to pay a bit of PAYE many years ago." And I was like, "Well, it's a tiny amount, I'll pay it now." And they said, no, we don't want the money. They said at the meeting, "We don't give a fuck about the money, we want you to go to jail. Withholding PAYE is criminal." And I'm like, "But it's what?" And my lawyers just said, "Look, you just stood up in front of the Prime Minister in the middle of election. All the resources are to getting rid of you. Get your family and get out of the country now, or you will be in jail and no judge will have mercy on you." It's like, oh shit.
Wow. So there wasn't any things on dogs. So that was an invention.
No, that was just made up.
Yeah. So it made up. And then there was intimidation to find something with you, and it was PAYE. And then you had to live in New Zealand. Wow, what a change of lifestyle.
Yeah, so I went from having millions of dollars to sort of eating rice with farmers in North Thailand.
That's great, to be honest. I'd rather that than sitting in table with those people you discussed about, or the USDA, or all of these things. But so you moved to Thailand.
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you the truth. I had made I'd started
I'm only taking the truth, by the way. Nothing but the truth.
Well, just, I mean, for my personal journey was that I'd gone from having really good, clean motives and other people making the money, and me, like I had one car that worked and one that needed work, and I couldn't make my mortgage payments, to realising that when we had committee meetings, trying to get all the guys to agree on something, all the other guys in the industry, when they were just all profit motive, I couldn't steer it how I needed to. And so I thought, well, bugger you lot, I'm going to set up the factory so that I make all the money. Next minute, I had millions of dollars, and I just had a bit of a midlife crisis. And I want to go be a rock star and play music, and had a clothing label and recording studio, do all this kind of crazy stuff. And I just felt one day I was sitting down, I had a beautiful property. I was sitting down by my little stream and thinking, I couldn't really feel that sort of peace anymore, and that divine presence I used to sort of feel around me had sort of gone. And I just even prayed and said, if you asked me now to give up all my money, I'd have trouble giving it over. And I felt like my heart, my soul was just being sucked into the ground. I felt like I was just attached to what I call the gravity of gold. The more you look at it and you desire, the more it just kind of eats your soul. And I said, take away everything that I don't need. And it took about 48. You pray a prayer like that, it takes about 48 hours. And they changed the laws overnight and just asset stripped me, basically. They came and took all my properties and just made up all this crap. And then, and so it was get out or go to jail time. Being, obviously it was incredibly traumatic, but by the time I sort of got, after about a year, I just felt so much better without having all that stuff weighing me down, so clear. And so I went to Thailand and just went and sat in temples and did meditation and vipassana and learned how to just be still and be silent and let all the trauma and attachment just kind of fade away and try to find myself again, so.
And you went with your family at the time, right?
Yeah.
So wife and 2 girls.
Yeah.
So you all it's a massive change for a family, obviously, to move for a completely different culture, to a different place, and to go to a journey of non-attachment, the art of letting go.
That's it.
It's the art that some of us are able to deal with in an early age. Some of us hold on to it until we having the last breath in our body. And so I feel like how we can have that non-attachment, the art of letting go. And it's a beautiful process that you went in Thailand with Vipassana and realizing, wait a minute, what is worth in this life? And so when is it that you moved to Thailand? Like in 2000?
It's about 2015, I think.
15, yeah?
Yeah.
For a few years?
Yeah.
Pre-COVID times.
Yeah.
That's good. Sorry, no disrespect.
Yeah.
To COVID times, which is another time. And you came back to New Zealand just...
Yeah, unfortunately, the trauma and stress was too much for my marriage. And so after 20 years, 6 months, 15 days and 8 hours, I think, of being together with the person that I loved, we had to go our separate ways.
Oh, that's so beautiful that you actually remember exact time of all of it. That's so nice.
Yeah, well, love is love, and we don't disrespect love. And while it's separation is difficult, I still love and have the greatest respect for my co-parent, and we move forward as friends. Yeah,
that's great, nice. And then you came back to New Zealand. I actually met you at the festival a few months ago, and that was super cool. And I know since you came back, obviously because of our time at the moment, which is time of how shall I put it? Of many people relying on pharmaceutical to save the day. Of what's going on, pandemic, COVID, monkeypox, chickenpox, sharkpox, all these things that are currently influencing our lives. And then you kind of thought how, as well, you kind of your motive is like, how can we make it less pharmaceutical reliant and creating some other stuff that can help us out in COVID times?
Well, I don't mind using technology and using tools.
Sure.
You know, it would be cool if we could just stand on top of a hill and shout, but you've got all this, you've got microphones and computers, and we're recording and we're using podcasts, and I'm okay with the synthetic technology, and I'm also okay with some synthetic drugs, you know.
I agree.
But I spent a good part of 20 years working out, setting up and managing a pharmaceutical company and studying all aspects of drug design and pharmacology, neuropharmacology and toxicity. And the really important thing for me was making sure that the drugs are safe enough. And so I understand toxicity testing. I understand all the tests that a medicine has to go through. I've been and audited all the different labs that do that work. So I know exactly what they do with the animals and with cell culture and everything else. And so I understand that stuff. And I'd spent such a long time arguing and debating with the government over the issues of how safe is safe enough for a drug. And so when I saw the drug, which was being proposed to be used for COVID, I was really, really, really surprised that anybody was looking at using a drug like that.
From what?
The community, the Pfizer community that was being offered by our government in New Zealand at the time. I'm like, hey, the toxicity on this hasn't really been done, and it's not measuring up. And what I understand about pharmacology is it's a little bit like, keys and locks. And so, for instance, we look at ecstasy, MDMA, and, some of your listeners will love MDMA and some of them will, might not be so sure about it. And for me, I've had somebody die from too much MDMA. So it's got a lot of benefit, particularly for trauma and for relationships, but there's also risks with it. And so we look at it and think, is there another way to produce the same sort of effect with less toxicity, with no brain damage and not so much damage to the heart? And there are. That's the thing that we do. And so how you do that is that your body is like a system of receptor sites, so like keyholes. It's a bit like a jigsaw. So you find a key that matches that keyhole. And so the keyhole that, for instance, maybe the keyhole that LSD fits into is similar to the keyhole that serotonin fits into. It sort of fits the same site. And the issue that I had with, particularly with the virus that came out, is it's got all those spike proteins on. And the spike protein is a key that fits into a keyhole that's designed for angiotensin. Angiotensin is a messenger that goes around the body to switch on and off different functions of the heart and the blood. And so once you've got something which fits in the angiotensin keyhole, then that means it's something which can get right into the messaging center that sends messages to your heart and your blood system. And so that spike protein that's on the COVID virus, that's why it can, if it gets in those ACE2 receptor sites, we call them, that's a messaging system and control system for your heart. That's why so many people were having, heart attacks.
Heart problems, yeah.
And then using a drug which emulates exactly that portion of the virus, I felt was actually quite a bad idea, because for a lot of people, because it's exactly the right shape to fit our heart's kind of message system, it's going to be causing issues with people's hearts and blood. And so I felt maybe it would be better if we target a different part of the virus, maybe the part that joins those together, the proteases, or maybe there are other natural ways to protect yourself, which I think there are. And then after that, of course, once friends started to take advantage of the government's wonderful offer to use this drug, a number of my friends started having heart attacks and strokes. A couple of my friends had heart attacks, and a couple had strokes, and a couple had uncontrollable bleeding issues. And that's when I realized that the spike protein was doing harm, and looked into research of how do you get rid of a spike protein? What are the body's natural ways of getting rid of an unwanted glycoprotein? And research, if you have a look at it, the body normally breaks down unwanted glycoproteins with things like bromelain. It's an enzyme that comes out of pineapple. If you take pineapple juice, you use it to tenderize meat. That's because bromelain breaks down glycoproteins, and the spike is a glycoprotein. And so if you've got somebody who's not bouncing back quite, like everybody else, either from injection or infection or connection, that might be that spike protein is still stuck in all their ACE2 receptor sites, all of the heart's keyholes. So the way to get rid of it is with bromelain and N-acetylcysteine. Is when bromelain and N-acetylcysteine, which is an amino acid, are combined together, it works wonders against various forms of cancers, and also anything which has got a clot that's got a sort of a fibrous texture around the outside. Bromelain, N-acetylcysteine together dissolve that and break it down. And scientists did some research on bromelain and N-acetylcysteine together against various types of cancers, and then tried it against COVID or against SARS-CoV-2 in cell culture, and found that it dissolved it. And so those were two compounds I felt would be really useful. And then the other thing that happened is, right back at the start of the COVID sort of story outbreak, some people asked some supercomputers to predict what's going to be the most useful things for us to use, looking at the SARS virus and looking at the human system. The computers could see, hey, that's going to clog these ACE2 receptor sites, the heart's message system. Predicted that the most useful things were going to be thymoquine, which comes out of black cumin seed, and quercetin. They would be in the sort of top 5 compounds that would protect our hearts against that virus. And so it's a shame that wasn't really publicised. I sort of felt the Ministry of Health might have been going to let everybody know these things and let them know how powerful vitamin D is, but they didn't. And so I've just started bringing those things in and put them into caps for people. So that's what I'm doing now, is making products, natural products, to support the body in its natural detoxification system from spike proteins.
Because the body is magnificent and is able to do that at times, and sometimes it needs a bit of help to be able to do that, especially against something like that. And what bothers me is the inability for us to be able to talk about it, and the I would say mass propaganda of it's safe and checked. And when there is more evidence that it hasn't been quite as we thought so, or at least as it's been told, I feel like there is a bit of chaos around it. There is a bit of distrust in that system that tells us these things, and then it raises a lot of questions. So wait a minute, if it's not that safe and hasn't been that tested, then why are we promoting that in such way? I remember in Israel was the first country to receive Pfizer vaccine. And in Israel, mainstream media, after, I think, 4 months, coined that we are the largest laboratory of Pfizer, because was new, and it hasn't been tested, rigorous testing of 7 to 10 years or whatever that is when they release new drug. And yet, when you suggest stuff like that and you want to question and you want to be able to get more information, I'm talking being here in New Zealand, we ended up labeling one another and, oh, no, you kind of, you this, you did, you anti, you like you, I guess most of people that I know, I'm all up for awesome debates, and I'm all up for really data-driven scientific knowledge that also evolves over time, right? So whatever we think now, maybe in 2, 3, 4 years might be different when we acquire more information. And I feel the lack of that openness and the intimidation, stigmatization of our communities around it made it feel really sour, in my opinion, to say the least. And so I feel like, so you're doing now these alternatives, obviously, to whatever the drugs that we currently have as the only solution, I guess, right? Because we just have that offer. There isn't any other alternatives in the mainstream offering for our communities. It's either these drugs, vaccines, whatever, but there is no other alternatives as far as I know.
Having still got some scars from my stoush or disagreement with the dominant alcohol industry, I just want to be really clear that I'm not creating an alternative to the vaccine at all.
Not at all.
The vaccines, could well be just a wonderful drug for people that like it. And I think if people want to experiment with a drug, then they should be allowed to experiment with the drug.
Sure, absolutely.
You should tell them what the risks are. I'm just going to point out that my product is not a medicine. I'm just providing nutrients, natural nutrients to support the body and its detoxification system from any kind of a spike glycoprotein it might have picked up. Not necessarily from the virus or the vaccine, just any glyco, spike protein.
Based on what the body does anyway, right?
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Yeah. So you mentioned that as well. So it's quite interesting because, I feel first of all we need to be able to talk about it and be able to present these ideas and be able to be criticized as well and have a challenging conversation, courageous conversation, rather than oh no, you're not allowed to speak about it.
Well, I think the restrictions have lifted off. I mean, the restrictions have lifted off having a mask. The restrictions have lifted off, talking to your friend or giving them a hug. And so I think the restrictions might as well come off speaking the truth as well. We should stop. Okay. Yeah, we need to stop muzzling our scientists and let's just speak the truth. Because if everyone takes off their mask together and we realise, actually the masks, everyone's got to make up their own mind about how effective the vaccine was. Have a look at how many friends you've got that got vaccinated and didn't get vaccinated and then got sick anyway. And then we were all wearing our masks, and did it stop the spread, or is actually everybody's caught COVID at least once now? Maybe those things didn't work. Okay, let's talk about something else, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I'm excited because now it's time to create something new. It's
totally
time to create something that is going to be a lot more bountiful and beautiful for our communities rather than being busy with whether this one is better for us or not.
Yeah.
I think there is a great opportunity for us to really reimagine everything that we have been doing in the past.
This is it.
And now it's time to serve a new imaginary concept that we're going to think, oh, freak me, this is awesome. Let's try that.
Well, I think the whole universe is an imaginary concept, really. All of this is just a kind of... it's just manifest consciousness. It's crystallized thought and intention is how I see it. But now, from my journey of taking the idea of a law to government and then presenting to United Nations, the highest authority on the planet, and then being, railroaded or walked over because somebody else, for personal profit reasons, wanted to come against it. To me, that has said, okay, that's the failure of that government system, and that the systems that we've got are mainly been built and based on a foundation of fear and anticipation of something going wrong. Fear is that negative energy form of thinking something's going to go wrong, so to try to do something about it. And that's what has empowered our laws and our governments, and people have become dependent on that. And I think that moving forwards, for me, I tried using that system, it hasn't worked. So we need a different system for regulating our recreational drugs and also for our independent health advice, moving away from government as our, it's kind of like a child that needs to wean off the mother's breast and become its own person. This is what this is what our community is becoming now. And so like the idea that I had was that instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do safety testing on my new recreational drugs and then submit them to some government authority. What we need to do is just all agree on a standard, and we'll all do safety testing on our recreational drugs and then just publish them out there and let the public decide. This could be an app, it could be decentralized. So my concept now, instead of developing legislation, is developing an app, so that, let's say we have a cryptocurrency for buying recreational drugs, and every time somebody spends money using that cryptocurrency, a portion of it goes into a fund which funds the toxicity testing on that particular drug, so that as a new drug, let's call it MD5, appears, as that starts to trend, suddenly there's a whole bunch of money sitting in the kitty for doing the tox testing on MD5. When that hits 10,000, we do genotoxicity. When it hits 50,000, it's carcinogenicity tests and so on. And we can build toxicity screening without using animals, because I got a dog and I love the dog, and I can see now that it's an expression of life the same as the rest of us. I don't really want to do any testing on animals, but then as a drug starts trending, people can look on the app and see, okay, MD5 has been through testing for all these organs and it's non-toxic. What we found in New Zealand, we created an alternative to ecstasy called EASE, and we put it on the market, did a clinical trial with about 1,000 people, and more than half of them said that they preferred this compound to MDMA because it was cleaner and not quite so cluttered in your brain, and so on. And we found that if you develop a product and the price is right and it's preferable to the illegal drug, then the market actually trends away from the illegal drug onto your legit product. And so this could all just be run through an app. People are buying the drugs, looking at the app and seeing which is the safest, choosing that, and then if you've got availability of a safer drug, then the other ones phase out. And we need to be doing the same, I think, with our health advisory. The health technology needs to be in the hands of the people. It shouldn't be held by private interests, which is what we've got at the moment. Governments are getting sort of bankrupt, running out of money, and so they're being propped up by industry, and that's what the World Economic Forum is all about. Is this government and industry working together to suit the needs of those people that make private profit? And what we need is different community systems which are just really here for the people, and that's what I'm really excited about.
And still
building.
keep it safe, obviously, in a way that we share the information, we share the trials. So if it's not on animals, how do we still test these things? Because how do we know the right quantities for someone and not the other, and cause this or the other in someone else's, So sure, you have this testing over time with use of people. If it's not animals, it has to be used by people, right?
Well, yeah, but there's other things that you can do now. Like, let's look at MDMA again, ecstasy. Really useful for PTSD or for broken relationship, but toxic to heart. Yeah, so what we can do is we can wrap that in a lipid or put it into an envelope, which only opens when it touches certain types of membranes, and so we can code it so it only opens when it touches the brain, and when it's touching heart tissue it doesn't open. And so just little tricks like that is where science is going.
Science is brilliant as well at the same time, as long as we're open to that. And I totally agree with you. I think if we can decentralize that from the hands of corporate interest, which often is not necessarily our greater interest, then we can see maybe potentially a use that is a lot safer as well, because it's going to be based on collective wisdom and collective trials rather than biased trials that are wanting to obviously go approved by the FDA or some sort of authorities that have sometimes conflict of interest as well at the same time of doing that. So
this is right, I mean, our information systems have been
I feel it's like we still, we have this amazing technology in our hands, and we still bring a very old paradigm and habits, but still you wanting to evolve as much as our technology evolves. And technology is far more advanced than actually our social construction of our society, whether it's what you described, how things are done. It's still sort of very limited. It hasn't reached the potential in which technology can allow us these days to do that. And I feel like if we incorporate more of that, so I love the idea of the app, or potentially, and this is a great thing, because what you described is the product that you created. In a way, it has natural ingredients in them, right? Whatever is in these pills, obviously, for the spike protein. And I feel that's a great opportunity to be able to actually try a new system of usability, of testing, and user experience as well to be shared and open and not enclosed. And then when a judge in the US made Pfizer release all these documents that they didn't want to do. So I feel like when it's centralized, that's what it creates. You need some judge to basically be on your side and say, sorry, guys, you're not going to wait 75 years. I want you to put it all now. So I feel like that is a great platform to be able to do that now. So, I mean, like, I'm excited about what the potential is and how we can kind of adopt new ways of thinking about how we do stuff and how we allow all of this. Yeah.
And this is that, I mean, in New Zealand at the moment, I mean, I'm excited in the last 5 years that United Nations there's a treaty now for the rights of indigenous people. And it says that indigenous people and all member states that sign on, indigenous people have a right to their own beliefs, and all member states that sign on agree to review all their legislation to ensure that it enshrines these values. And so part of that is all indigenous peoples have got a right to their own beliefs about the healing systems in their body. And so I think that particularly in New Zealand, where we've got sort of two health systems now, we've got Māori health, that is an embodiment of those indigenous rights. And that's, I think, the path that we need to go down. So to be able to continue to create products and be able to understand that these products are allowed to interact with our bodies. And yes, Spike Detox is 4 natural ingredients. So it's black cumin seed, and there's bromelain that comes out of pineapple, quercetin that's in onions and lots of fruit, and N-acetylcysteine, which comes out of garlic. And so that's that one. It's from Extra Life, xtralife.co.nz. If you've got friends that aren't bouncing back quite as quickly from injection, infection, or dodgy connection, that's the one.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and my model is that how about if the company has some investment comes in, investors get their money back, and then everything just kind of moves into a trust. So instead of the company's directors having to maximize return to shareholders, the company instead becomes a public benefit corporation which sells products to people that can afford it and gives products to people that can't afford it.
That's great. Yeah, I'm keen to investigate more about it. And if you were to imagine the world that we're going to, what would be something that would make you feel, I want my girls to be growing up to this world that is slightly different than the current one, kind of to end up with something that gives us the opportunity to imagine something new?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different... I think what's happening at the moment is there's a great awakening. And for me, even coming through a divorce and realizing that I had moved into a patternized role system of husband and wife and, dependence and codependence, all that, coming out of that and asking, why? I thought, this love was forever, whatever. Realizing that we come into dependence with control systems, and there's a time when you need to cut those things open and break off from them. The same thing as what's happening between our community and our government. And then and after that, I had like a sort of awakening. I came into a relationship with another beautiful human being, and just started having sort of spontaneous Kundalini awakening, just being able to suddenly see a whole lot more color, like I'd had mushrooms or something, and feel something rising up and this massive energy building around my chest and heart, and just being able to look at plants and have them just starting to zone into a plant and have it to start talking to me about its medicinal properties and stuff, and then looking it up and realizing I'm not imagining it, and just had that kind of thing happening. And then knowing that this is the awakening that the I am is what's within me, the divine energy, and then looking at people and looking into people's eyes and just seeing another being inside of each person around me, and then just seeing, feeling, realizing that this is that we're transcending, in a sense. We're transcending fear and coming into a place of belief and manifestation. And I think it's going to be like that nth monkey syndrome, when so many people have got it that are carrying that light, that then it just pops across into everybody else. And so the world that I see is one where, like I went to a Kiwi burn, the first Burning Man I've been to, and just the idea of everybody coming with something to share to festival, and not coming to take and consume, but coming to give, and people building stuff together like that is just, there's a whole new kind of a consciousness going on, which is not profit based, not fear based, and not self based. And I guess that's what I'm kind of looking forward to. Yeah.
That's very beautiful. I'd love to I feel really emotional because we feel the same, and I think it's I don't know, a good time to wrap up with that beautiful positivity. And I like what you said, because you are a divine being, a light being, and the potential is absolutely unlimited. And so I feel like together we can collectively come up with an incredible solutions and incredible initiatives that would bring that future to be like that. Remove the fear, remove the dependent of something or someone else, and really kind of allow Mother Nature to still nourish us in that beautiful way and connect us. I had an amazing time actually talking to you, and I can actually go for another 10 hours having some amazing immunity juice. It's so much. But yeah, let's keep the conversation and let's do that again and check in few months, see how we're going. And I like the idea of what you said here, and it's a great potential for us to create something that is decentralized. Love your work, and you have a beautiful heart. I sense that. If you guys have any comments, any suggestions, ideas, you're welcome to let us know. That's Made Bowden, Isaac here. Wow, you are a divine being. We love you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was super cool.